Alright, so today we're going to continue with Judges 12. I'm changing one thing up. I've been reading from different versions of the Bible throughout this study. I kind of just pick and choose one. I have a King James, and I have like the King James Amplified side by side, ESV, NIV, all kinds of different versions that I like to read from. I like to look at the different interpretations and translations and go with that. A friend of mine who watched one of my videos hit me up and asked me, which one are you reading from? Because I got an ESV and it didn't quite match up. So today, specifically, I want to do this one reading from the ESV. I think it's got a lot of good stuff to go off of, so let's check this out. So we're still talking about Jephthah. He just got done winning a war against the Ephraimites, and he made a huge mistake in promising that he would basically sacrifice his own daughter to God, and didn't watch his words very wisely. And so it continues. The men of Ephraim were called to arms, and they crossed to Zaphon and said to Jephthah, "Why did you cross over to fight the Ammonites?" I take it back there. He defeated the Ammonites, not the Amorites, and did not call us to go with you. We will burn your house over you with fire. So that's silly. They're upset because they didn't get to share in some glory. They're like, whoa, you went and defeated them. Everyone's all celebrating. Everyone's talking about your tribe, of Gilead, and that's nonsense. We're the Ephraimites, and we're Ephraim. We should be leading this charge, and we should be getting this glory. And they were very jealous. These people are all distant relatives. They're not brothers, but they're more like cousins or sister tribes, stuff like that. They're so angry they even make this weird threat: "We will burn your house over you with fire." That, I think, is something silly to do. I don't think you should make threats, even if you're planning on following through with them. It's silly. I mean, making threats when you don't get your way is a weird thing to do. I hear a lot of people joke at times, and I tend to joke a lot, and that's one of my biggest flaws, is how much I can joke, and I've really been trying to get a cap on the way I speak. But one thing I don't do, and I stay away from, is I don't joke around like, "Oh, dude, you're lucky I don't kick your butt," or "You're lucky I don't break your fingers." I don't say stuff like that, because to me that is beyond personal in joking, and you're elevating to a level of threat. Even if you think you're joking, you never know how somebody interprets that. I don't joke like that. I once worked with I was working security, but this guy was a former correctional officer. He always joke, "Oh, dude, I'd beat your, A word," and he would joke around like that, and it was annoying at times. Like, it's just something you just don't say. I just don't agree with that, and this threat right here was a very silly threat to make. And Jephthah said to them, "I and my people had a great dispute with the Ammonites, and when I called you, you did not save me from their hand. And I saw that you would not save me. I took my life into my hand and crossed over against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why have you come up this day to fight against me?" So he comes up with a pretty harsh reply, and is like, "Hey man, I called you guys there, you weren't there. They were attacking my people, I went over, I crossed, and I handled this, and the Lord gave me this victory. So how dare you come here and try to take the glory when the Lord gave us the victory?" And I can understand why he would argue so violently after basically they threatened to burn his house down. However, if you go back to the last chapter when he was first talking to the Ammonites who were coming up against Israel, he tried diplomacy. He's like, "Hey, I don't want to fight you guys. You guys are coming at me. You want something from me. I don't want to do that." It's weird that he was able to show that kind of diplomacy with an enemy, but when it came to his brethren, like I said, not directly related, but sister tribes, or however you want to look at it, part of the 12 tribes of Israel, he came out with fury. And they came out fury with him. This shows that there was this inner spark of rivalry between them. And there's a lot of sibling rivalry references throughout the Bible. Esau and Jacob, Cain and Abel. There's a lot of brotherhood rivalry that leads, honestly, to some pretty gnarly things, and it's a flaw that the Bible points out. And it's between brothers or brethren, sister tribes. It doesn't matter. It's a huge flaw when you have like this competition, or you try to have this lordship over your brother. Often you'll see God give the lordship to the weaker brother, or a middle brother, or someone who's earned it in some way. When it came to the 12 tribes of Israel, he chose the fourth brother, Judah, to inherit the promise, and that's because the other brothers had made some really hard mistakes and did not fix the flaws in their character, versus Judah, who had this splitting apart from his family into another land, had this huge lesson he learned with a prostitute Actually, it wasn't a prostitute. It was his son's wife that he married from son to son to son, and then refused to take care of her. That his own law stated how he was supposed to take care of her, and through that he learned a lot. And you see him come back to his family. So when he comes to uh, in Israel, he comes back to Israel and sees his brother there. Uh, he's able to come forward and be like, you know what? Don't take Benjamin. Take me instead. Don't do this to our father. You can see that maturity grow. And that's kind of the people God looks for, the people that can mold their hearts and kind of like acknowledge their flaws and strategize ways to get over them, and look to the Lord to get over them. Really look at what the lessons in your life that the Lord's trying to teach you, and learning how to grow with those lessons versus taking those lessons and letting them just harden your heart even further. These people's hearts were hardened, including Jephthah. He just went through this huge lesson where, uh, he fought these people and saved them. The Lord gave a victory into his hand. But he started with diplomacy. And, he should have done the same with his brethren here. And I can tell that there's a little bit of like trauma response for him, at least in my opinion. Because you go back to the beginning when we are introduced to Jephthah, he was ran out by his brothers who told him he was less than because he was the son of a prostitute. Who told him that he was less than because he wasn't their father's child, like they were, and grew up in the house, and they cast him away and wouldn't let them stay with him, and that's a horrible thing to have to put up with and deal with. So, now you have this tribe, and you'll hear the response. So, then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim, and the men of Gilead struck Ephraim because they said, "You are fugitives of Ephraim, you Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and Manasseh." So they're basically saying, like, you're not even worth being a tribe of Israel. You're just some renegades who are barely even our people, thinking you can take us on and take this glory and talk to us like that. And that's something Jephthah has probably been hearing his whole life up until this point. When he was not as powerful, didn't have the same kind of power, he had to deal with this. Now he's in a position of power where he can actually do something. When people talk to him like that, it's like, I don't got to put up with you, dude. I'm not at a point in my life where I have to take that anymore. And instead of like diplomacy and letting it roll off and coming up with a better solution for his brethren, he said, I'm not going to put up with that. In fact, you guys are done for. Because then it says, and the Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. And when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, let me go over, the men of Gilead said to him, are you an Ephraimite? When they said no, they said to him, then say Shibboleth. And if he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right, they seized him and slaughtered him at the fords of the Jordan. At that time, 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell. That's hardcore. I mean, this was a massacre that Jephthah absolutely won and took over, and they didn't let anyone escape. And they were able to tell. The reason they had them say this is because of where they were raised, they couldn't enunciate the same words. So they were able to tell if they were one of. That's what I'm saying. They were so close. They were sisters. You couldn't tell by looking at them. Like, their skin's different, their hair grows different, they have different heights. They were so close in relation, they couldn't even tell, like, you're not of a different nationality, you're not of a different race, you're one of us, you're my brethren. I can't tell you guys apart unless we use this dialect, which just comes from the culture of your dialect and how that's evolved. So that's the only way they could tell these guys apart, which shows you how closely related they were. So, and 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell. My goodness, like, that's a lot. And when you think about our own lives, there's been so many times I've seen people, myself included, so willing to help a stranger, so willing to go the distance for others in other families or friendships or whatever. But when it comes to your own siblings, sometimes like there's this natural competition, or it's like you can't be happy that they bought a house, you can't be happy that they just had another kid, you can't be happy they got a promotion at work. There's a part of you that just, why do they get this? Why don't I get that? And when you are the sibling that maybe gets a lot, you might have this prideful thing like, well, that's because of the 7 of us, I'm the one. I mean, you guys didn't quite make choices like me, aren't quite as smart as me. And there's like this power struggle in families. And this is shown here. It's like you had one side that was prideful, the other side that was like, why have I lived my life? Jephthah, why have I lived my life like this and never been able to do anything about it? And then he gets to the point where it's like, I can do something about it. And I find that, that happens with siblings a lot of times. It's so hard. Sometimes I hear sisters talk about each other. I mean, I've seen someone jump in and like give all this advice to these strangers about how they should live life and how they should do these. And, and they tell them, well, we've done this, this, and this. And they're like, oh, no worries, no worries. That's because of this, and they explain it to them, and then they go home to their own family, and their family's like struggling with something similar. They're like, I'm sick of dealing with you. You should be over this. We're not kids anymore. Get over it. I'm sick of it. And I just think that we forget sometimes, and we can even harden our hearts against our own family versus anyone else. And I think you should have a softened heart to anybody, more so family. Not saying that you should give them more than anyone else, but like, you should know. You can look at a stranger and be like, yeah, they've gone through this, but deep down underneath it, I can see this soul that's just needs help. Then you look at your sister, and you should know what your sister's gone through, or your brother, or whoever, and you look at them and are like, yeah, I see this, what they went through, but nah, too bad. I went through stuff too. They should get over it. We shouldn't be doing this, and she needs to get it together. Her life is so bad, and almost like they're so miserable with their own life. It gives them enjoyment to put their sibling down because it makes them feel better about their choices. It's like the ones that are close to you become like this scapegoat or this fall guy where you can be like, yeah, I'm not so bad. It just feeds back into that pride, and it's just bad for family dynamics. It's going to be hard. I mean, could you imagine raising your kids and they treat each other like Jephthah and the Ephraimites? I mean, it's insane what happened. 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell. So, and it says, Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gilead died and was buried in his city in Gilead. So what we learned from Jephthah is, he was abused growing up. He was kicked to the side. When they needed something from him, he showed up. When he needed something from God, he tried making a deal like they made a deal with him. He promised something to God without thinking carefully of his words. Tried to make peace with the enemy when it didn't work. Slaughtered them and won with a victory. Had to sacrifice his own daughter because of his own foolish talk. And then when the Ephraimites came to him and they had foolish talk, he made them pay the price as well. He just learned the price he had to pay by not strengthening his tongue and not having control over it. And when these people made the same mistake as him, he's like, well, I had to sacrifice my daughter, so guess what? Y'all's gonna die. And instead of learning from when he was younger what happened to him, and like, I don't want to be that person. I want to be in the spot where people do that. He just went the exact opposite way, and he's who judged Israel for 6 years. So you can imagine the state of Israel's in. It's like, that's your leader. That's the kind of leadership you're taking in at that point in time. I remember and somebody I know, I don't want to give their name because everyone's heard this line before, but like, what are you doing? That's worth more than you make in a year. Silly and cringy line. If someone said that, I'd be like, But some people see it in TV, they see it on shows, they read it in books or something like that, and maybe they've been told that before. People have treated them with that spirit of just like, who do you think you are? Do you know who I am? Well, this person I was with, there was a small accident, and they literally said that line to somebody. Well, that's worth more than you make in a year. And it's like they've been holding that in for these years, and they finally let it out. And they've probably been waiting so long to actually been able to say that to somebody and treat them like that. And afterwards, and speaking to that person, it's like their soul felt just as empty. They're like, man, that did not make me feel the way that I always dreamed it was going to make me feel. It's a weird example, but something I did personally witness and experience and speak with an individual about in my life. So anyway, we'll read the last bit of this. There's not much left, and I know I've prattled on quite a bit. So next we have, after him is Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters, and gave in marriage outside of his clan, and 30 daughters he brought in from outside for his sons. He judged Israel for 7 years. Then Ibzan died and was buried in Bethlehem. So this guy comes in, and he's already like, I'm taking in the foreign wives and foreign sons. And the reason God said that wasn't because like this race is better than that race. It's because other practices of these cultures were into like child sacrifice and witchcraft and just things that were really bad for your soul and bad for the people in your household. And it created a mind much like Jephthah. It created these circumstances that these people weren't learning from. It just created them to go down there and numbed them to the need to grow and learn from these experiences, and instead just let them. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with a little prostitution. Like, go grab it up, do what you gotta do, it's no big deal. No, sacrificing your child, is that really that bad? I mean, like, yeah, they're alive, and then you burn them, and your crops grow, and then you get money, and you can have more kids, There was a mindset that was being pushed, and that's why God didn't really want them doing that. So they had 6 years of following Jephthah, who made those kind of big mistakes, I'm not saying he wasn't a guy that trusted in God, but he definitely made huge mistakes. Then you have this Ibzan, if I'm saying that right, and he went and did things that was kind of like, what are you doing, dude? So Israel has now 13 years of that's their leadership. After him, Elon, the Zebulunite, judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. Then Elon, the Zebulunite, died and was buried in Ahalon in the land of Zebulun. Doesn't say much about him, just says he led for 10 years. Doesn't say whether he did something good or something bad. In my understanding of that, I'm going to assume that he just left Israel in the same state it was. You know, he just, not like he fixed it, not like he made it worse, but it was just in the same state as it went on. After him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, judged Israel. I'm probably saying a lot of names wrong. Sorry. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, who rode on 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died and was buried in Parithon, in the land of Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. Another thing God kind of commanded for his people was not to amass like horses, donkeys, the same thing. It was just a sign of military might. So when you went out against others, you could say, well, it was my own might that saved me, instead of recognizing when God gave you the victory. So he wanted his people to stay humble, and he wanted them to stay within trusting him, within like putting their faith in him and relying on him when he said it was time to fight and when it wasn't. So that's the leadership they had now for, so you have 13, 23, and let's see, he judged really 8 years. So you have like 31 years of this shaky leadership, role models, and things going on. And when you come to the next chapter, it's going to be Manoah, which is the father of Samson, and how Samson came along. So this is just kind of painting the picture as we went through Judges, and we've talked about a lot of the characters that just shows you the state of Israel and how it's just jumping up and down and getting worse and worse. And eventually, by the time the monarchy comes around in Israel, you'll see the mindset of the people was so wishy-washy and just like tainted by very weird practices in what they did. You know, like I said, with child sacrifice and prostitution and marrying multiple women and mistreating the women. Their minds were just so far down this rabbit hole that it was really hard for them to come back from and see God's bigger plan, even when he was saving them left and right, though he sent them prophets to be a mouthpiece and tell them what they needed to do and how much he's going to help them out, and they still just couldn't acknowledge it, and they just wanted to throw someone else in leadership. They wanted a human mighty man to just take on and save them from the nations, because they were sick of having to like follow these silly rules God's given us. I mean, like, you can't have a prostitute, like, come on, I can't have a bunch of concubines, come on, you know, just leave me alone. Like, I know I sacrificed my first 3 kids, but they were all girls. I got a boy here, you know, he's here to take on the role of the patriarchy of my family. So I mean, who needed those 3? I mean, I have more, sorry. So that was kind of the mindset of what was going on, and these pictures kind of paint towards it. The lessons we can learn from that is, you know, acknowledging our own flaws, like Jephthah should acknowledge his own traumas, and he had strength. He had strength when he tried to be a diplomat to them. He said something very wise. He brought up the history. He brought up reasoning why they shouldn't do it. But when it came down to it, he was a warrior and he handled business. When it came to his own people, he didn't try to be wise. He didn't try to do anything. He just wanted to be a warrior and get down to business. But in his mind, I understand, like, the trauma made him give that response. Same with the way he talked to God. You know, he's like, you know, God, when the people were like, hey, Jephthah, we need you to help us, but we'll give you this if you do help us. When he went to God, it's like, God, I need your help, but I'll give you this, you know. And you kind of see the lessons in there. We can look at ourselves and be like, when have we cut deals? When have we let our past drive our futures and lead us into making mistakes? And how much have we gone down that path of just downward spiraling without acknowledging God? And that's kind of what it's about. Sometimes you just gotta, like, you know what, God, I've tried at the steering wheel for so many years, Lord, and I just need you to take the wheel. I need to step back and let you take a step forward and follow the path you have for me. And although I can't see the end of it, although you can see farther than I can, and you've chosen to reveal such a little amounts to me, I'll trust you enough to follow this path, knowing that you're leading me to a good place. So anyway, that was my quick Judges 12 study there. Sorry I was kind of all over the place, but just kind of read that. I hope everyone's having a blessed night, and take it easy.